The rain came down in cold sheets, turning the city streets into black mirrors that reflected the yellow glow of streetlights. Tanya Brooks pulled her worn blue jacket tighter around her shoulders as she pushed through the heavy glass doors of Patterson Tower, her cleaning supplies cart rattling behind her. 11:30 at night, and her body ached from scrubbing floors on the 15th floor of the office building. But she couldn't think about being tired. Not when 7-year-old Caleb was waiting in her old Honda Civic in the parking garage, doing his homework by the dome light like he did 3 nights a week. She hurried across the slick pavement, her sneakers splashing through puddles. The parking garage was just 2 blocks away. 2 blocks and she could get Caleb home, feed him the sandwich she'd packed, and maybe, if they were lucky, get 6 hours of sleep before her morning shift at the diner started. That's when she saw him. A man lay crumpled on the sidewalk ahead, his body twisted at an odd angle. His white shirt was no longer white. It was dark, soaked through with something that couldn't be just rainwater. His police badge caught the streetlight, glinting weakly. His radio crackled with static and distant voices, but he wasn't moving. His eyes were closed, his face pale as paper. Blood pooled beneath him, mixing with the rain, spreading out in thin red rivers that ran toward the gutter. Tanya's first instinct was to run past him. Get to Caleb. Get home. Pretend she never saw this. She had a son to think about. A son who needed her. She couldn't get involved in something like this. What if whoever did this was still nearby? What if they came after her too? She was just a cleaning lady. Just a single mom trying to survive. But her feet stopped moving. The man's chest rose slightly, then fell. He was breathing. Barely. His hand twitched, fingers reaching for nothing. His lips moved, forming words that made no sound. Tanya looked around. The street was empty. No cars. No people. Just rain and darkness and this dying man at her feet. She pulled out her phone with shaking hands and dialed 911. "There's a police officer," she said, her voice cracking. "He's bleeding. He's on the corner of 5th and Madison. Please hurry." The dispatcher's calm voice asked her questions. Was he conscious? Was he breathing? Could she see where the blood was coming from? Tanya knelt beside him, her knees hitting the wet concrete. The cold rain soaked through her jeans immediately. She pressed her hand against the wound in his side, feeling the warm blood pulse against her palm. He groaned, his eyes fluttering open for just a second. "Stay with me," Tanya whispered. "Help is coming. Just stay with me." His eyes found hers. Blue eyes filled with pain and fear and something else. Confusion, maybe. Like he couldn't understand why a stranger was kneeling in the rain beside him, holding pressure on a wound that was stealing his life. His hand moved slowly, weakly, and found hers. His fingers were cold. So cold. "You're going to be okay," Tanya said, though she didn't know if it was true. "I'm not leaving. I'm right here." The dispatcher told her the ambulance was 3 minutes away. 3 minutes felt like forever. Tanya kept talking to him, kept her hand pressed firm against his side, kept watching his chest rise and fall. Each breath seemed harder than the last. His grip on her hand weakened. "My son," Tanya said suddenly, desperately. "He's 7. His name is Caleb. He's waiting for me. And you have people waiting for you too, right? So you have to hold on. You have to fight." Sirens wailed in the distance, getting closer. Red and blue lights painted the wet street. The ambulance screeched to a stop, and paramedics jumped out with their equipment. They moved fast, taking over, checking vital signs, loading him onto a stretcher. One of them, a woman with kind eyes, looked at Tanya. "You saved his life," she said. "If you hadn't stayed with him, applied pressure, he would have bled out before we got here." Tanya stood slowly, her legs unsteady. Her hands were covered in blood. Her blue jacket was ruined. She watched them load the officer into the ambulance, watched them work on him with practiced efficiency. She should go. She should get to Caleb. But her feet wouldn't move. "Which hospital?" she heard herself ask. "St. Mary's," the paramedic said, already climbing into the ambulance. "Is he going to make it?" The paramedic paused. "I don't know. But you gave him a chance." The ambulance doors slammed shut, and then they were gone, sirens screaming through the night. Tanya stood alone on the sidewalk, rain washing the blood from her hands. Her heart pounded. Her whole body shook. She had just held a dying man's life in her hands. A complete stranger. And something about those blue eyes, that cold hand gripping hers, had changed something inside her. She couldn't explain it. She just knew she needed to make sure he survived. She ran the 2 blocks to the parking garage, her mind racing. Caleb looked up from his math workbook when she yanked open the car door, his brown eyes going wide. "Mama, what happened?" You're all wet. Baby, we need to go to the hospital, Tanya said, starting the engine. I'll explain on the way. As she drove through the rain-slicked streets toward St. Mary's, she told Caleb about the officer. About how he was hurt and needed help. About how sometimes, even when you're scared and tired and you have your own problems, you have to help people. Because that's what good people do. That's what she wanted Caleb to learn. That kindness mattered. That hope mattered. That love for your fellow human beings always mattered, even when it was hard. Caleb listened quietly, then reached over and squeezed her hand. You did the right thing, Mama? Tanya's eyes burned with tears. She didn't have time to cry. She hoped she had. She hoped that officer was still fighting. She hoped her decision to stop, to stay, to care would mean something. If a stranger was dying right in front of you, would you risk everything to save them, even when you have your own child waiting? What would you do? Drop your answer in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to see what happens to Tanya and the officer she saved. Will he survive? Will her kindness cost her everything or change her life forever? Hit that subscribe button now. St. Mary's Hospital was bright and sterile, a stark contrast to the dark, rainy streets outside. Tanya held Caleb's hand as they walked through the automatic doors, her shoes squeaking on the polished white floor. The emergency room was busy even at this late hour. A nurse at the front desk looked up, her expression neutral and professional. I need to know about the police officer who just came in, Tanya said, her voice stronger than she felt. Brandon Mitchell. Is he okay? The nurse's eyes narrowed slightly. Are you family? No, but I'm the one who found him. I stayed with him until the ambulance came. The nurse's expression softened. Have a seat. Someone will update you when they can. Tanya led Caleb to the plastic chairs in the waiting area. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. A television in the corner played the news on mute. Other people sat scattered around the room, all wearing the same tired, worried expressions. Waiting was torture. Not knowing was worse. Caleb leaned against her shoulder, his math workbook forgotten in his backpack. Is the officer going to die, Mama? I hope not, baby. I really hope not. Time crawled. Tanya watched the clock on the wall. Midnight came and went. 12:30. 1 o'clock. Her phone buzzed with a text from her manager at the diner, asking if she could cover the early shift. She texted back that she couldn't, that she had a family emergency. It wasn't exactly a lie. This felt like an emergency, even if the man wasn't her family. He was someone's family. Someone's son. Maybe someone's husband or father or brother. At 1:45 the emergency room doors burst open, and two people rushed in. A man in an expensive gray suit and a woman in a red dress, both of them looking frantic. The man went straight to the nurse's desk. Brandon Mitchell, he said, his voice loud and commanding. Our son. He's a police officer. He was brought here. Mr. and Mrs. Mitchell, the nurse said, standing immediately. Your son is in surgery. The doctor will be out to speak with you as soon as possible. Please have a seat. The couple turned toward the waiting area, and the woman's eyes were already red from crying. They sat down across from Tanya, holding hands tightly. The man's jaw was clenched. The woman kept touching her face, like she couldn't quite believe this was happening. Tanya felt like she was intruding on something private. She should leave. Let his parents be here for him. But she couldn't make herself stand up. She needed to know he was okay. She needed to know her decision to stop hadn't been for nothing. A doctor in green scrubs came through the doors an hour later. Mitchell family? The couple jumped to their feet. How is he? Is our son alive? The doctor's face was tired but calm. He's stable. The surgery went well. He lost a lot of blood and the injury was serious, but he's young and strong. He's going to need time to recover, but he should make a full recovery. Mrs. Mitchell sobbed and fell into her husband's arms. Mr. Mitchell closed his eyes, his whole body sagging with relief. Thank God. Thank God. Can we see him? Mrs. Mitchell asked. He's in recovery now. Give us another hour and you can sit with him. As the doctor walked away, Mr. Mitchell noticed Tanya for the first time. Are you here for Brandon? Tanya stood slowly, suddenly feeling very out of place. I'm the one who found him. I just wanted to make sure he was okay. Mrs. Mitchell turned, her eyes widening. You found him? You saved him. I just called 911 and stayed with him, Tanya said quietly. Anyone would have done the same. No, Mr. Mitchell said firmly. Not everyone would have. Most people would have kept walking. You stayed. You helped him when he needed it most. He walked over to Tanya and held out his hand. She shook it, feeling the strength in his grip, seeing the gratitude in his eyes. I'm Richard Mitchell. This is my wife, Patricia. We owe you our son's life. I'm Tanya Brooks. This is my son, Caleb. Patricia came over and took both of Tanya's hands in hers. Thank you. Thank you so much. I don't know I can't even find the words. I'm just glad he's going to be okay, Tanya said, and meant it with everything in her. Please sit with us, Patricia said. Wait with us until we can see him. I need to know more about what happened. Tanya sat back down, Caleb curling up beside her. She told them everything. Finding Brandon on the sidewalk. The blood. The ambulance. How he'd gripped her hand. How she'd promised she wouldn't leave. Patricia cried through the whole story, and Richard's eyes glistened with unshed tears. You have a good heart, Richard said when she finished. In this city with everything people face, you could have walked away. You had your own child to think about. But you stopped. You helped. That's what my mama always does, Caleb said sleepily. She helps people. Patricia smiled through her tears. You're raising a good boy. They waited together, talking quietly. Tanya learned that Brandon was 28 years old, had been a police officer for 5 years, and was their only child. He lived alone in an apartment downtown, loved his job, and coached youth basketball on weekends. He was a good man, they said. A kind man. The kind of man who became a police officer because he wanted to help people. When the nurse finally said they could see Brandon, Richard turned to Tanya. Please come with us. He should know who saved him. Tanya hesitated. I don't want to intrude. You're not intruding, Patricia said firmly. You're part of this now. Please. Tanya woke Caleb gently and followed the Mitchells down a long white hallway to a recovery room. Brandon lay in a hospital bed, his skin still pale but no longer deathly white. Tubes and wires connected him to various machines. His eyes were closed, but his chest rose and fell steadily. Patricia went to his side immediately, taking his hand and kissing his forehead. My baby, she whispered. My sweet boy. Richard stood at the foot of the bed, his hand on Brandon's leg, just needing to touch him to know he was real and alive. Tanya stayed near the door with Caleb, feeling like she was seeing something too personal, too sacred. But then Brandon's eyes opened slowly. He looked confused at first, trying to focus. His gaze moved from his mother to his father and then, somehow, across the room to Tanya. His eyes widened slightly and something like recognition crossed his face. You, he said, his voice rough and weak. You were there. On the sidewalk. Tanya nodded, her throat tight. I'm glad you're okay. You saved me, Brandon said. I remember your voice. You told me to hold on. You told me about your son. This is Caleb, Tanya said softly. And I'm Tanya. Thank you, Tanya, Brandon said, and even though he could barely speak, the gratitude in his voice was overwhelming. Thank you for stopping. Thank you for staying. I couldn't leave you, Tanya said simply. I just couldn't. Richard came over to Tanya, and this time his eyes were full of determination, not just gratitude. Tanya, my son is alive because of you. Please let us help you in return. Whatever you need. Anything at all. Tanya started to protest, to say she didn't need anything, but Patricia cut her off gently. Please. It would mean so much to us. You missed work to be here. Let us at least cover what you lost tonight. Tanya thought about saying no. About being proud and independent like she always was. But then she looked at Caleb, sleepy and leaning against her, and she thought about her empty bank account and the bills piling up and the fact that she really couldn't afford to miss even one shift at the diner. Okay, she said quietly. Thank you. That would help a lot. Richard pulled out his wallet and handed her $500 bills. For tonight. And if you need anything else, anything at all, you tell us. Tanya took the money with shaking hands, tears filling her eyes. Thank you. This is so kind. It's nothing compared to what you did, Patricia said. You gave us our son back. As Tanya left the hospital that night, Caleb asleep in her arms and the money safe in her pocket, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. Real, genuine hope that maybe kindness really did matter. That maybe helping people, even when it was scary and hard, led to something good. She didn't know it yet, but her life was about to change in ways she couldn't imagine. All because she'd stopped on a rainy sidewalk and refused to leave a stranger to die alone. 3 days later, Tanya stood outside Brandon's hospital room, a container of homemade soup in her hands. She felt awkward being here, like maybe she was overstepping. But Patricia had called her that morning, asking if she could visit, saying that Brandon kept asking about her. So here she was in her cleanest jeans and a green sweater, hoping she wasn't making a mistake. She knocked softly on the door frame. Brandon was sitting up in bed, looking much better than he had 3 nights ago. His color was back, and though he still had tubes in his arms, he was awake and alert. He smiled when he saw her, a genuine smile that reached his eyes. "Tanya," he said. "You came. Your mom said you wanted to see me. I brought soup. Chicken and rice. It's nothing fancy, but it's good when you're not feeling well." "You made me soup?" Brandon looked genuinely touched. "You didn't have to do that." "I wanted to," Tanya said, setting the container on the table beside his bed. "How are you feeling?" "Better. Sore but better. The doctors say I can go home in a few days if everything keeps healing right." He gestured to the chair beside his bed. "Please sit. Stay for a bit." Tanya sat, folding her hands in her lap. "I'm glad you're okay. I was really worried." "I owe you my life," Brandon said seriously. "The paramedics told me I wouldn't have made it if someone hadn't found me when you did. If someone hadn't stopped the bleeding. That was you. I just did what anyone would do." "No," Brandon said firmly. "Most people wouldn't have. They would have been too scared, too worried about their own safety. But you stopped. Even though you had Caleb waiting for you. Even though you were probably terrified. You stopped and you saved me." Tanya felt her cheeks warm. "I couldn't just leave you there." "That says everything about who you are," Brandon said softly. "My parents told me you waited at the hospital for hours. That you stayed even when you didn't have to." "Why?" Tanya thought about how to answer that. "I guess I needed to know you'd be okay. That stopping was worth it. That I'd made the right choice." "You did," Brandon said. "You absolutely did." They talked for an hour. Tanya told him about Caleb, about her 2 jobs, about how hard it was sometimes but how she wouldn't trade being a mom for anything. Brandon told her about being a cop, about how much he loved helping people but how dangerous it could be. He told her about the night he was attacked, how someone had come out of nowhere, how he'd fought back but not fast enough, how he'd thought he was going to die alone on that sidewalk. "Then I heard your voice," he said. "And I knew I had to hold on. I knew someone was there, someone cared, and I couldn't give up." When Tanya finally stood to leave, Brandon reached for her hand. "My parents want to do something for you. Something bigger than just covering one night's lost wages. Please let them. It would mean the world to them." "To me?" "They already helped me," Tanya protested. "The money they gave me paid my rent this month. That was huge." "They want to help more," Brandon insisted. "They want to help with Caleb, with childcare, with whatever you need. Please, Tanya. Don't say no because of pride. Say yes because you deserve help. Because Caleb deserves better. Because what you did for me, for my family, it's worth so much more than money, but money is something we can give." Tanya felt tears prick her eyes. She thought about Caleb sitting in the car while she worked late shifts. About the bills she juggled every month. About the future she wanted to give him but couldn't afford. About how tired she was all the time from working herself to the bone just to survive. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay, I'll accept their help. With gratitude." Brandon's smile was radiant. "Good. That's so good." 2 days later, Tanya met with Richard and Patricia at a coffee shop near the hospital. They sat in a quiet corner, cups of coffee steaming between them, and Richard pulled out a folder. "We've been thinking about how to help you in a meaningful way," he said. "Not just a one-time payment but something that could change your life. Make things easier for you and Caleb." "You've already been so kind," Tanya said. "Please listen," Patricia said gently. "We own a hotel chain. Mitchell Hotels. 15 locations across the state. We need good people, hardworking people, people with heart. We'd like to offer you a position as a guest services coordinator at our downtown location. Better hours, better pay, benefits, and a future." Tanya's hands shook as she held her coffee cup. "You're offering me a job?" "A career," Richard corrected. "With room to grow. To move up. To build something real." "I don't have experience in hotels," Tanya said, her voice uncertain. "I've only done cleaning and waitressing." "You have something more valuable than experience," Patricia said. "You have compassion. You have integrity. You have a work ethic that's obvious to anyone who knows your story. We can teach you the rest." "The position pays $60,000 a year," Richard added. "With health insurance, dental, vision, and a retirement plan. You'd work Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. Weekends off to spend with Caleb." Tanya's vision blurred with tears. $60,000. That was more than she made in 2 years at her current jobs combined. Health insurance meant she could take Caleb to the doctor when he was sick instead of hoping it would pass. Weekends off meant she could actually be a mom, not just a tired person who existed in the same house as her son. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. "Say yes," Patricia said, reaching across the table to take Tanya's hand. Say yes and let us help you the way you helped our son. Yes, Tanya said, tears streaming down her face now. Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. Patricia came around the table and hugged her tightly. You're going to do wonderful things, Tanya. I can feel it. Over the next week, as Brandon continued to recover in the hospital, Tanya visited him every day after her last shift at the diner. She'd given her 2 weeks' notice at both jobs, and though her managers were sad to lose her, they were happy she'd found something better. Caleb came with her to the hospital sometimes, and Brandon always lit up when he saw the boy. Hey little man, Brandon would say, and Caleb would climb up on the chair beside the bed and tell Brandon all about his day at school. I got an A on my spelling test, Caleb announced one afternoon, proudly showing Brandon the paper with the big red A at the top. That's amazing, Brandon said, giving him a high five. You must have studied really hard. Mama helped me, Caleb said. She always helps me. Brandon's eyes found Tanya's across the room, and something passed between them. Understanding, maybe. Respect. A connection that was growing stronger every day. On Brandon's last day in the hospital, before he was discharged to go home and finish recovering, Tanya brought him a card that Caleb had made. It was construction paper folded in half, with a crayon drawing of a police officer with a big smile on the front. Inside, in Caleb's careful 7-year-old handwriting, it said, "Thank you for being brave. Get better soon. Your friend Caleb." Brandon's eyes got misty as he read it. This is the best thing anyone's ever given me. He really likes you, Tanya said softly. He talks about you all the time. I really like him too, Brandon said. And his mom. Their eyes met, and Tanya felt her heart skip. There was something in the way Brandon looked at her, something warm and real and deeper than gratitude. But she pushed the thought away. He was just being nice. Just being grateful. Nothing more. I start my new job on Monday, she said, changing the subject. I'm nervous. You're going to be great, Brandon assured her. And I'll come visit you at work once I'm cleared to move around more. Moral support. You don't have to do that. I want to, Brandon said simply. You've become important to me, Tanya. You and Caleb both. I want to be part of your lives if you'll let me. Tanya's throat tightened. We'd like that. As she left the hospital that night, Caleb's hand in hers, Tanya felt like she was walking into a new chapter of her life. A better chapter. One filled with hope and possibility and maybe, just maybe, something that felt like the beginning of love. But she wouldn't let herself think that far ahead. Not yet. For now she was just grateful. Grateful that she'd stopped on that rainy sidewalk. Grateful that Brandon was alive. Grateful that kindness had led somewhere good, just like she'd always believed it would. Monday morning arrived bright and clear, and Tanya stood in front of Mitchell Hotel's downtown location wearing a navy blue dress she'd bought at a thrift store and her best pair of shoes. Her hands trembled as she pushed through the glass revolving doors into a lobby that looked like something from a magazine. Marble floors gleamed under crystal chandeliers. Fresh flowers sat in tall vases on every surface. Well-dressed guests moved through the space with purpose and ease. A woman in a red blazer approached her with a warm smile. You must be Tanya Brooks. I'm Diane Foster, the hotel manager. Welcome to the team. Diane showed her around, introducing her to the other guest services coordinators, the front desk staff, the concierge team. Everyone was kind and welcoming, but Tanya still felt like an imposter. Like at any moment someone would realize she didn't belong here and send her back to scrubbing floors. But as the days passed, she found her rhythm. Her job was to make sure guests had everything they needed, to solve problems before they became complaints, to create experiences that made people want to come back. It turned out that years of waitressing and cleaning had taught her exactly how to read people, how to anticipate needs, how to make someone feel valued and cared for. By the end of her first week, Diane pulled her aside. You're a natural at this. The guests love you. You have an instinct for hospitality that can't be taught. Tanya glowed with the praise. For the first time in years, she felt like she was good at something beyond just surviving. On Friday afternoon, as she was helping an elderly couple plan their anniversary dinner, she heard a familiar voice behind her. Excuse me, I'm looking for the best guest services coordinator in the building. She turned to find Brandon leaning against the marble desk, a crooked grin on his face. He was out of the hospital, dressed in jeans and a blue button-up shirt, still moving carefully but looking so much healthier than the last time she'd seen him. Brandon, she said, her face breaking into a smile. What are you doing here? Moral support like I promised. Plus, I wanted to see you in action. The elderly couple beside them looked between Tanya and Brandon with knowing smiles. Is this your boyfriend, dear? The woman asked. No, no, Tanya said quickly, feeling her cheeks heat. Just a friend. A very good friend, Brandon added, his eyes twinkling. After Tanya finished helping the couple, she took her break and sat with Brandon in the hotel's coffee shop. He'd bought them both lattes and a cookie for Caleb, who would be getting out of school in an hour. You look good, Tanya said. Really good. I feel good. Doctor cleared me for light duty next week. I'll be back at work soon, just desk stuff for a while. I'm glad. I know you miss it. I do, but I've kind of enjoyed the break. Given me time to think about things. About what matters. He paused, stirring his coffee even though he hadn't added anything to it. I've been thinking about you a lot, actually. Tanya's heart did that skip thing again. Yeah. About how different my life would be right now if you hadn't stopped that night. I'd be dead, Tanya. Dead on a sidewalk in the rain. But instead, I'm here, drinking coffee with you, planning to meet Caleb after school. It's like I got a second chance at life and I don't want to waste it. You're not wasting it, Tanya said softly. You're a good person, Brandon. You were before I found you and you still are. I want to be better, he said. I want to be the kind of person who makes a real difference. Like you do. They talked until Tanya's break ended and Brandon promised to come back later that week. He kept his promise. He came by the hotel 3 times that week, always with some excuse. He needed to ask about booking a room for a colleague. He was meeting someone for lunch in the hotel restaurant. He wanted to check out the gym facilities. But really, Tanya knew he just wanted to see her. Caleb adored Brandon. The 3 of them started spending time together outside of work and hospital visits. Brandon would pick them up on Saturday mornings and take them to the park, where he and Caleb would play catch while Tanya sat on a bench and watched, her heart feeling fuller than it had in years. Brandon never made her feel like a charity case. He never acted like he was doing them a favor. He just seemed genuinely happy to be with them. One Saturday, after they'd gotten ice cream and were walking back to Tanya's apartment, Caleb ran ahead to look at a dog, and Brandon fell into step beside Tanya. My parents want to meet Caleb, he said. Actually, they want to do more than meet him. They want to help him. Tanya's steps slowed. Help him how? They want to pay for him to go to Riverside Academy. It's a private school, one of the best in the city. Small classes, great teachers, programs for arts and sports, and everything a kid could want. Tanya stopped walking altogether. Brandon, that's too much. Private school is expensive. I can't accept that. Why not? Brandon asked, turning to face her. You accepted the job. You accepted help with other things. Why not this? Because a job is something I can earn. This is just, it's too big. Tanya, look at me. Brandon's voice was gentle but firm. My parents almost lost their son. You gave him back to them. There is nothing they could give you that would be too much. And more than that, they like you. They like Caleb. They want to be part of your lives. This isn't about paying a debt. This is about family helping family. We're not family, Tanya whispered, but even as she said it, she wasn't sure it was true anymore. We could be, Brandon said, and something in his tone made her look up sharply. If you want it, we could be. Before Tanya could respond, Caleb came running back, full of excitement about the dog. The moment passed, but it hung in the air between them, full of possibility and promise. That night, after Caleb was asleep, Tanya called Patricia Mitchell. Her hands shook as she dialed, but she knew what she had to do. Patricia, it's Tanya Brooks. Tanya, how wonderful to hear from you. How was your first week at the hotel? It was good. Really good. Thank you again for everything. Tanya took a deep breath. Brandon told me about your offer. About Riverside Academy. Oh, I hope he didn't upset you. We don't want to overstep. You're not, Tanya said, tears filling her eyes. You're not overstepping at all. I want to say yes. I want to accept your help for Caleb. He deserves the best education possible and I can't give him that on my own. So yes, with all my gratitude, yes. Patricia's voice trembled with emotion. Thank you for letting us do this. For letting us be part of his life. Thank you for wanting to be, Tanya said. After she hung up, she sat in her small living room and cried. Not sad tears, but overwhelmed, grateful, hopeful tears. 6 weeks ago, she'd been barely surviving, working herself to exhaustion just to keep a roof over their heads. Now she had a real job with benefits and a future. Caleb was going to one of the best schools in the city. And Brandon, sweet, kind, handsome Brandon, was becoming more than a friend. He was becoming something she was afraid to name because naming it might make it disappear. But as she wiped her tears and checked on Caleb one more time before bed, she let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, good things really did happen to people who tried to do good in the world. Maybe kindness really did lead to love. Maybe her life was finally becoming the story she'd always hoped it would be. The next 2 months passed in a blur of changes and new routines. Caleb started at Riverside Academy, and the difference was immediate. He came home every day bursting with stories about his art class, his science experiments, his new friends. He had homework that actually challenged him, teachers who knew his name and cared about his progress, and opportunities Tanya had only dreamed of giving him. Tanya thrived at Mitchell Hotels. Diane promoted her to Senior Guest Services Coordinator after just 6 weeks, impressed by her work ethic and natural ability to connect with people. The pay increase meant Tanya could finally build a savings account, something she'd never had before. She could buy Caleb new clothes instead of thrift store finds. She could take him to the movies without worrying about how she'd pay for groceries that week. But the best change was Brandon. He was around constantly, and Tanya had stopped pretending it was coincidental. He came to the hotel for lunch every week, always sitting at the restaurant table where he could see her working in the lobby. He picked up Caleb from school on Tanya's late days, taking him for pizza or to the park until she got off work. He spent every Saturday with them and most Sundays too, becoming as much a part of their routine as breakfast and bedtime stories. Richard and Patricia embraced them completely. Sunday dinners at the Mitchell house became a tradition. The first time Patricia invited them, Tanya had been nervous, worried about not fitting into their world of wealth and privilege. But Patricia had hugged her at the door and said, "You're family now," and somehow that made it true. Those Sunday dinners were loud and warm, filled with laughter and stories. Patricia taught Caleb how to make her famous brownies. Richard challenged him to chess games and let him win just enough to keep him interested. Brandon would sit beside Tanya at the table, their shoulders touching, passing dishes back and forth with an ease that felt domestic and right. One evening after dinner, as they all sat in the Mitchell's living room, Caleb curled up between Tanya and Brandon on the couch. Richard cleared his throat. "Tanya, we've been talking, Patricia and I, and we'd like to offer you something else." Tanya tensed slightly. "You've already done so much." "We'd like to set up a college fund for Caleb," Richard said, "so that when the time comes he can go anywhere he wants, study anything he dreams of without financial burden." Tanya's eyes filled with tears. I don't even know how to respond to that." "Say yes," Patricia said gently. "Let us do this. Let us invest in his future." Tanya looked down at Caleb, who had fallen asleep against Brandon's shoulder, his face peaceful and content. She thought about all the nights she'd stayed awake worrying about how she'd ever afford college, how she'd give him the opportunities he deserved. And now, because she'd stopped on a rainy sidewalk and helped a stranger, her son's entire future was secure. "Yes," she whispered. "Thank you. From the bottom of my heart, thank you." Brandon's hand found hers and squeezed gently. She squeezed back, holding on like he was an anchor in a sea of overwhelming gratitude and emotion. Later that night, as Brandon drove them home, Caleb asleep in the back seat, he glanced over at Tanya. "You okay? You've been quiet." "I'm just thinking about how much everything has changed," Tanya said. 3 months ago, I was working 2 jobs and barely making rent. Now, Caleb's in private school with a college fund, I have a career I love, and I have people who care about us." "You have me," Brandon said softly. "You definitely have me." Tanya's heart raced. "Brandon? I know this is probably too soon," he continued, keeping his eyes on the road. "I know we haven't really talked about what this is between us. But Tanya, you and Caleb, you've become the best part of my life. Spending time with you isn't an obligation or a way to repay a debt. It's what I want to do. Where I want to be." "I feel the same way," Tanya admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've been afraid to say it, afraid to believe it's real." "It's real," Brandon said, finally looking at her as he stopped at a red light. "This is the most real thing I've ever felt." They sat in charged silence for a moment, the weight of unspoken feelings hanging between them. Then Brandon reached over and took her hand, threading his fingers through hers. "I'm not asking for anything to change right now," he said. "I just wanted you to know. I'm here. I'm all in. Whenever you're ready." Tanya's eyes burned with happy tears. "Okay," she said. "Okay." At work the next day, Tanya floated through her tasks with a smile that wouldn't fade. Diane noticed immediately. "You look different today," she said. "Good different. Happy different." "I am happy," Tanya admitted. "Really genuinely happy." "It's Brandon, isn't it?" Diane asked with a knowing smile. "The officer who comes by here all the time pretending he needs hotel information?" Tanya laughed. "Is it that obvious?" "Honey, the man looks at you like you hung the moon. And you look at him the same way. It's actually kind of beautiful. That afternoon, Brandon showed up during Tanya's break as he often did. But this time, instead of coffee in the cafe, he asked if she wanted to take a walk. They strolled through the nearby park, the spring air warm and fresh, flowers blooming in the beds along the path. I got cleared for full duty, Brandon said. Back on patrol next week. Tanya's smile faltered slightly. That's good. I know you've been anxious to get back. I have, but I'm also nervous. After what happened, going back to the streets, it's different now. You'll be careful, Tanya said firmly. You have to be careful. I will, he promised. Because I have reasons to come home now. Real reasons. He stopped walking and turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. Tanya, I need to tell you something. I've been holding back because I didn't want to rush you or pressure you, but I can't keep it in anymore. Tanya's breath caught. Okay. I'm falling in love with you, Brandon said, his blue eyes intense and honest. I might already be there, actually. I love how strong you are, how kind, how much you love your son. I love spending time with you. I love the sound of your laugh. I love that you see the best in people even when they don't deserve it. I love you, Tanya Brooks, and I needed you to know. Tears streamed down Tanya's face. I love you too, she said, the words feeling both terrifying and freeing. I've been so scared to feel this way, scared it couldn't be real, but it is. I love you, Brandon. He pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her, and she buried her face in his chest, feeling his heart beat strong and steady against her cheek. They stood like that for a long moment, holding each other, letting the truth of their feelings settle over them. So what now? Tanya asked, looking up at him. Now we stop pretending we're just friends, Brandon said with a smile. Now I get to take you on actual dates and hold your hand in public and tell everyone that you're my girlfriend. Tanya laughed through her tears. Your girlfriend? I haven't been someone's girlfriend since high school. Well, you're mine now, Brandon said. If that's okay with you. That's more than okay, Tanya said. That's perfect. As they walked back to the hotel, hand in hand, Tanya felt like she was living in a dream. A good dream. The kind she'd stopped letting herself believe in years ago. But it was real. Brandon was real. This love growing between them was real. And for the first time in longer than she could remember, she let herself believe that happy endings weren't just for other people. Maybe they were for her too. What would you do if you found real love in the most unexpected place? Would you be brave enough to accept it, or would fear hold you back? Share your thoughts in the comments and make sure you're subscribed because this love story is just getting started. You won't want to miss what happens next. Spring turned to summer, and Tanya's life continued to blossom in ways she'd never imagined. Dating Brandon was easy and natural, like it was something she'd been doing forever. He never pressured her, never rushed her, just let their relationship unfold at its own pace. They went to movies and dinner, took Caleb to the zoo and the science museum, spent quiet evenings at her apartment watching Caleb's favorite shows and eating takeout. The first time Brandon kissed her, really kissed her, was on her tiny apartment balcony after Caleb had gone to bed. They'd been sitting in the warm evening air, talking about everything and nothing, and then Brandon had cupped her face in his hands and kissed her so gently, so sweetly, that Tanya had felt it all the way to her soul. I've been wanting to do that for weeks, he'd whispered against her lips. You should have done it sooner, she'd whispered back, making him laugh. Brandon's return to full patrol duty had been hard for Tanya. Every night he worked, she found herself checking her phone constantly, waiting for a text that said he was safe, that his shift was over, that he was coming home. The fear never fully went away, but Brandon was patient with it, understanding it, calling her whenever he could just to say he was okay. His fellow officers were curious about the woman who'd saved his life. Brandon brought Tanya and Caleb to a police department barbecue in July, and she met the men and women he worked with every day. They treated her like a hero, thanking her over and over for saving their brother in blue. It was overwhelming and humbling and made her love Brandon even more, seeing how much his colleagues cared about him. So you're the famous Tanya, a female officer named Rachel said, shaking her hand warmly. Brandon talks about you constantly. It's actually kind of annoying how happy he is. Tanya laughed. I hope that's a good thing. It's the best thing, Rachel assured her. We've never seen him like this. You're good for him. As summer progressed, the Mitchell family's acceptance of Tanya and Caleb deepened even further. Richard offered Tanya a promotion to assistant hotel manager at a different Mitchell Hotel's location, one closer to Caleb's school and with even better pay. She accepted gratefully, loving the challenge and responsibility of the new position. Patricia took Tanya shopping for professional clothes, insisting on buying her a whole new wardrobe suitable for management. They spent a day at the mall trying on suits and dresses, and Patricia treated it like an outing with a daughter, not a favor for someone she barely knew. "You've become so important to us," Patricia said as they had lunch between stores. "Not just because of what you did for Brandon but because of who you are. You're genuine and kind and strong. I've always wanted a daughter, and now I feel like I have one." Tanya's eyes filled with tears. "You've all been more like family to me than my own family ever was." "Then we're your family now," Patricia said firmly. "All of us." Caleb was thriving in ways that amazed Tanya every day. His teachers at Riverside Academy praised his intelligence and creativity. He joined the school's art club and discovered a love for painting. He made friends easily, good kids from good families who invited him to birthday parties and playdates. He was happy. Genuinely, completely happy. And that was worth more to Tanya than anything else in the world. But the biggest sign of how much their lives had changed came one evening in late August. Tanya, Brandon, and Caleb were at the park, playing on the swings as the sun set in brilliant oranges and pinks. Caleb was laughing, soaring high on the swing, calling out for them to watch him go higher. "Mama, Brandon, look at me," he shouted. And then, without thinking, he yelled, "Dad, push me higher." The word hung in the air. "Dad." Caleb froze, his swing slowing, his face going red. "I'm sorry," he said quickly, looking mortified. "I didn't mean to, it just came out, I'm sorry." Brandon walked over to Caleb's swing and knelt down beside him, taking his small hands. "Caleb, look at me. You have nothing to be sorry for. Nothing. You can call me whatever feels right to you. If that's Brandon, that's perfect. If that's Dad, that's perfect too." "Really?" Caleb's eyes were wide and hopeful. "Really?" Brandon said, his voice thick with emotion. "I would be honored if you wanted to call me Dad." Caleb threw his arms around Brandon's neck, and Brandon held him tight, looking over the boy's shoulder at Tanya with eyes that glistened with tears. Tanya covered her mouth with her hand, her own tears flowing freely. After they got Caleb to bed that night, Brandon stayed at Tanya's apartment. They sat on the couch, close together, processing what had happened. "Are you okay with that?" Brandon asked. "With him calling me Dad?" "I'm more than okay with it," Tanya said. "Brandon, you've been more of a father to him in these few months than anyone has ever been. You love him. He loves you. Why wouldn't I be okay with it? I just don't want to overstep. He has a biological father somewhere. Who's never been in his life," Tanya said firmly. "Who didn't want to be. You've chosen to be here, chosen to love him, chosen to be part of his life. That makes you his father in every way that matters." Brandon pulled her close, kissing the top of her head. "I love him, Tanya. Like he's my own son. I know it's fast, I know we've only been together a few months, but I can't imagine my life without either of you in it anymore." "Me neither," Tanya whispered. "This is my family now. You and Caleb and your parents. This is where I belong." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, just holding each other, feeling the weight and wonder of the family they were building together. Tanya thought back to that rainy night 6 months ago, to the choice she'd made to stop and help a dying stranger. She'd had no idea that choice would lead here. To love. To belonging. To a future brighter than any she'd dared to dream. "Thank you," Brandon said suddenly. "For what?" "For stopping that night. For saving my life. For letting me into yours. For being you." "Thank you for being worth saving," Tanya said, tilting her face up to kiss him. "And for loving us the way you do." As the summer faded into fall, Tanya, Brandon, and Caleb fell into an easy rhythm of life together. Brandon spent more nights at Tanya's apartment than at his own. They had family dinners, homework sessions, movie nights. They were building something real and lasting, something that felt like forever. And for Tanya, who had spent so many years just trying to survive, just trying to give her son a decent life, this felt like a miracle. A miracle born from a simple act of kindness on a dark, rainy street. A miracle that proved what she'd always believed, that love and hope and goodness were worth fighting for, worth believing in, worth choosing even when it was hard. Because choosing kindness had led her here. To Brandon. To this family. To this love. And she wouldn't trade it for anything in the world. October brought cooler weather and falling leaves, and with it, a shift in the air between Tanya and Brandon. They'd been dating for 5 months, and while they said, "I love you" regularly, while Brandon spent most nights at her apartment, while they'd become a unit in every practical sense, they hadn't talked about the future. About what came next. About whether this was leading somewhere permanent or if they were just enjoying the present. Tanya tried not to think about it too much. She was happy. Caleb was happy. Why rock the boat by pushing for more? But late at night, when Brandon was on patrol and she was alone in her bed, She couldn't help wondering what he wanted. If he saw a future with her, or if eventually the novelty would wear off and he'd realize she was just a single mom from a completely different world than his. Her doubts came to a head one Thursday evening in mid-October. Tanya had the night off and she planned to make a nice dinner for the three of them. She'd spent her afternoon off preparing Brandon's favorite meal, pot roast with vegetables and homemade biscuits. The apartment smelled amazing, and Caleb had helped her set the table with real plates instead of the everyday ones. Brandon arrived at 6, still in his uniform from his shift, looking tired but happy to be there. Caleb ran to hug him and Brandon scooped him up with a laugh. "Something smells incredible," Brandon said, kissing Tanya's cheek. "Mama made your favorite," Caleb announced. "And I helped with the biscuits." "Then I'm sure they're the best biscuits ever," Brandon said, setting Caleb down and ruffling his hair. Dinner was perfect. They talked and laughed, and Caleb told them all about his day at school, about the painting he was working on in art class, about his friend Tyler's upcoming birthday party. After dinner, Caleb went to his room to work on homework, and Tanya and Brandon cleaned up the kitchen together, moving around each other with practiced ease. But Brandon was quiet, distracted. He kept starting to say something and then stopping, his brow furrowed like he was working through something difficult. "Is everything okay?" Tanya finally asked, drying the last dish and turning to face him. Brandon leaned against the counter, his arms crossed. "I need to talk to you about something." Tanya's stomach dropped. This was it. The moment she'd been dreading. He was going to end things. Tell her this had been nice but he needed to move on. That she and Caleb were great but he wanted something else, someone else, a life that didn't include them. "Okay," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. Brandon seemed to sense her fear. He reached for her hands, holding them gently. "Hey, no. Don't look like that. This isn't bad. At least, I hope it's not bad." "Then what is it?" Brandon took a deep breath. "Tanya, I need to tell you what I want. What I see for us. I've been holding back because I didn't want to scare you or pressure you, but I can't keep it inside anymore." Tanya's heart pounded. "Okay. I want this," Brandon said, gesturing around the apartment. "This life. These dinners. Caleb calling me dad. Coming home to you every night. I want it permanently. I want us to be a real family, not just people who are dating and spending time together. I want to wake up next to you every morning. I want to help Caleb with his homework and take him to his art classes. I want to build a life with you." Tanya stared at him, afraid to believe what she was hearing. "Brandon, I know we come from different worlds," he continued. "I know my family has money and connections and I'm a cop and you're you. But none of that matters to me. What matters is that I love you. I love Caleb. I love the person I am when I'm with you. You make me better. You make me want to be better." "You think our worlds are too different?" Tanya asked, her voice small. "That's what you're worried about? Aren't you worried about it?" Brandon countered gently. "Don't you worry that eventually you'll realize I'm not good enough for you? That I'm just a cop who works long hours and comes home exhausted and doesn't have much to offer beyond how much I love you?" Tanya laughed, but it came out more like a sob. "Brandon, are you serious right now? You think you're not good enough for me? I'm the one who's not good enough. I'm the one who didn't finish college, who worked as a janitor and a waitress, who lived paycheck to paycheck. You're educated and kind and brave and you have this amazing family. I'm the one who doesn't fit into your world." Brandon pulled her close, holding her tight. "You're wrong. You fit perfectly. And you are more than enough. You're everything." Tanya buried her face in his chest, breathing in the familiar scent of him, feeling his heart beat steady and strong. "I love you so much," she whispered. "I love this life we're building. I want it to be permanent too. I want you here every day. I want us to be a real family." Brandon pulled back just enough to look at her face, his hands cupping her cheeks. "Then let's do it. Let's make this real. Move in with me. Or I'll move in here, I don't care which. I just want us to be together. Really together." "Your apartment is bigger," Tanya said with a watery laugh. "And closer to Caleb's school. Then you'll move in with me?" Brandon asked, hope bright in his eyes. "Yes," Tanya said. "Yes, we'll move in with you." Brandon kissed her then, deep and sweet and full of promise. When they finally broke apart, both of them were smiling through happy tears. "Should we tell Caleb?" Brandon asked. "Let's tell him together." They found Caleb in his room, sprawled on his bed with his math homework. He looked up when they came in, immediately sensing something was different. "What's going on?" he asked. Brandon sat on the edge of the bed and Tanya sat beside him. "Caleb, how would you feel about moving? About living with me in my apartment?" Caleb's eyes went wide. "Really? All of us? Together? All of us together, Brandon confirmed. If that's okay with you. Caleb launched himself at Brandon, wrapping his arms around his neck. Yes, that's so okay with me. We'll be a real family. We're already a real family, Tanya said, tears streaming down her face again. But yes, we'll all live together. It'll be our home. That night, after Caleb finally fell asleep, too excited to settle down quickly, Brandon and Tanya lay together on her couch, holding each other close. When should we move? Tanya asked. Whenever you're ready. This weekend if you want. I can get some guys from the station to help with the heavy stuff. This weekend sounds good. Tanya paused. Brandon, are you sure about this? About us? About taking on a ready-made family? I've never been more sure of anything, Brandon said firmly. Tanya, you and Caleb aren't a burden or an obligation. You're my joy. My future. My everything. I want this. I want you. I want him. I want all of it. What about your parents? What will they think? Brandon laughed. Are you kidding? They're going to be thrilled. My mom has been hinting about this for weeks. She loves you both. Tanya relaxed into his arms, letting herself believe this was real. That this happiness was hers to keep. That she didn't have to be afraid of losing it because Brandon was all in, just like he said. They were building something permanent, something lasting, something beautiful. I never thought I'd have this, she admitted quietly. A man who loves me and my son, who wants to be part of our lives, who isn't scared off by the hard parts. I didn't think that existed. It exists, Brandon said, kissing her forehead. And it's ours. This is ours, Tanya. This love, this family, this future. It's all ours. As Tanya drifted off to sleep in Brandon's arms that night, she thought about the journey that had brought them here. From a rainy sidewalk to this moment, from fear and uncertainty to love and belonging. She'd taken a chance that night, choosing to stop and help a stranger. And that choice had given her everything she'd ever wanted. Love, family, home, hope. A future brighter than any dream she'd allowed herself to have. And it was all real, all hers, all because kindness had led her here. To Brandon. To this perfect, imperfect, beautiful life they were building together. Moving day came on a bright Saturday morning in late October. True to his word, Brandon had recruited a group of officers from his precinct to help. Rachel showed up with her husband and a pickup truck. 2 other officers, James and Carlos, arrived with donuts and coffee. Even Richard and Patricia came, Patricia bringing sandwiches for everyone and Richard ready to direct traffic and organize boxes. Tanya didn't have much. After years of moving from one small apartment to another, she'd learned to keep possessions minimal. But what she did have, her small collection of books, Caleb's toys and art supplies, the few pieces of furniture she'd accumulated over the years, all of it got loaded into trucks and driven across town to Brandon's apartment. His place was beautiful. A 2-bedroom condo on the 8th floor with big windows that let in tons of natural light. There was a real living room with space for a couch and chairs, a kitchen with actual counter space, and a second bedroom that would be perfect for Caleb. Brandon had already cleared out half his closet for Tanya's clothes and made space in the bathroom for her things. Welcome home, he said, carrying Tanya over the threshold while Caleb giggled and everyone else cheered. By late afternoon, everything was unpacked and put away. The officers had left, promising to have them over for dinner soon. Richard and Patricia stayed longer, helping arrange furniture and hanging pictures on the walls. Patricia had even brought new bedding for Caleb's room, a navy blue comforter with stars on it that made him gasp with delight. This is the best room ever, Caleb announced, flopping onto his new bed. That evening, after everyone had gone home and it was just the 3 of them, they ordered pizza and sat on the living room floor eating straight from the box, too tired to care about plates or proper seating. This is perfect, Tanya said, looking around at their new home. This is absolutely perfect. It is now, Brandon said, reaching for her hand. Now that you're both here. The next few weeks were an adjustment. Learning to live together, to share space, to navigate each other's routines and habits. But it was a good adjustment. Tanya loved waking up next to Brandon every morning. She loved making breakfast for all 3 of them, loved the chaos of getting Caleb ready for school while Brandon got ready for his shift, loved the normalcy of it all. Brandon was a neat freak, which amused Tanya to no end given her years of cleaning for a living. He did the dishes immediately after every meal, kept the bathroom spotless, and insisted on making the bed every single morning. Tanya was Messier, leaving books on the coffee table and shoes by the door, and Brandon would tease her about it even as he picked up after her with a smile. Caleb loved having Brandon around all the time. They developed their own routines. Brandon helped him with homework every evening. They played video games together on weekends. Brandon taught Caleb how to throw a proper football spiral and how to ride a bike without training wheels. He was patient and kind and exactly the father figure Caleb had always needed. In early November, the Mitchell family hosted a big dinner to celebrate Tanya and Caleb officially moving in with Brandon. It was at Richard and Patricia's house and the whole extended family came. Brandon's aunts and uncles, his cousins, his grandmother. They welcomed Tanya and Caleb with open arms, treating them like they'd always been part of the family. Brandon's grandmother, Eleanor, a tiny woman with sharp eyes and an even sharper wit, pulled Tanya aside during dinner. "You're good for my grandson," she said. "He's happier than I've ever seen him." "He's good for me too," Tanya said. "For both of us." "I know," Eleanor said, patting her hand. "I can see it. You love each other. Really love each other. That's rare, you know. Real love. Most people settle for something less. But you two, you have the real thing." "I hope so," Tanya said softly. "I know so," Eleanor corrected. "I've been married for 60 years. I recognize real love when I see it." At the end of the evening, as everyone gathered in the living room, Richard stood up and clinked his glass to get everyone's attention. "I want to make a toast," he said. "To Tanya and Caleb, who have brought so much joy into our lives. Tanya, 6 months ago you saved our son's life. But you did more than that. You brought him back to us with a heart full of love and a new understanding of what really matters. You've become part of this family and we're so grateful for you. To Tanya and Caleb." To Tanya and Caleb, everyone echoed, raising their glasses. Tanya's eyes filled with tears. Brandon squeezed her hand. Caleb, sitting on Patricia's lap, beamed with happiness. This was family. Real, true, chosen family. And it was theirs. The next week, Diane called Tanya into her office at the hotel. Tanya went with some trepidation, worried she'd done something wrong. But Diane was smiling when she walked in. "Sit down, Tanya. I have something to discuss with you." Tanya sat, her hands folded in her lap. "You've been with us for about 7 months now," Diane said. "And in that time, you've gone from guest services coordinator to senior coordinator to assistant manager. You're a natural leader. The staff respects you, the guests love you, and you have an instinct for this business that can't be taught." "Thank you," Tanya said, unsure where this was going. "I'm being promoted," Diane continued. "Regional manager. And I recommended you to take my place as hotel manager." Tanya's jaw dropped. "What?" "Diane, I can't, I've only been here 7 months. There are people who've been here for years. And none of them have your drive or your ability," Diane said firmly. "Mr. Mitchell, Richard, he approved my recommendation personally. The job is yours if you want it. Significant pay increase, more responsibility, more opportunity to grow. What do you say?" Tanya's mind raced. Hotel manager. Running this entire property. It was more than she'd ever dreamed possible. Just a year ago, she'd been scrubbing floors. Now she was being offered a position that would set her up for a real career, a real future. "Yes," she said, her voice strong. "Yes, I want it." "Thank you." Diane came around the desk and hugged her. "You've earned this. Every bit of it. I'm proud of you." That night, Tanya came home to find Brandon and Caleb making dinner together in the kitchen. Well, Brandon was making dinner while Caleb helped, by eating half the ingredients. They both looked up when she walked in, and something in her face must have given away that she had news. "What happened?" Brandon asked immediately. "I got promoted," Tanya said, still processing it herself. "Hotel manager. I'm going to be running the whole property." Brandon hooped and picked her up, spinning her around while Caleb cheered. "That's amazing. I'm so proud of you." "I can't believe it," Tanya said. "A year ago I was a cleaning lady. Now I'm a hotel manager." "You were never just a cleaning lady," Brandon said, setting her down but keeping his arms around her. "You've always been extraordinary. Now everyone else just sees it too." That night, after Caleb was asleep, Tanya and Brandon sat on their balcony, looking out at the city lights. "Everything is falling into place," Tanya said softly. "Sometimes it scares me how perfect everything is. Like it can't possibly last." "It will last," Brandon said. "Because we'll make it last. Because we choose each other every single day. That's what makes it work." "I love you," Tanya said, leaning into him. "I love this life we're building." "I love you too," Brandon said. "And Tanya, this is just the beginning. We have so much more ahead of us. So many good things coming." Tanya believed him. For the first time in her life, she believed that good things could be permanent, that happiness could last, that love could be strong enough to weather anything. Because she had Brandon. She had Caleb. She had a family and a career and a future full of possibility. All because she'd chosen kindness on a rainy night 6 months ago. All because she'd stopped to help a stranger. All because love and hope and goodness had led her here, to this perfect moment, to this beautiful life, to this family that was finally completely hers. Winter arrived, bringing cold winds and early darkness, but inside their home, everything was warm and bright. Christmas approached, and Tanya threw herself into making it special for Caleb. It would be their first Christmas as a real family living together, and she wanted it to be perfect. Brandon seemed distracted as the holiday neared. He was working extra shifts, picking up overtime, and when he was home he was often on his phone, texting someone and then quickly putting the phone away when Tanya walked into the room. She tried not to worry, tried not to let her old insecurities creep back in, but it was hard. One evening in mid-December, after Caleb had gone to bed, Tanya finally confronted him. "Is everything okay? You've been acting strange lately." Brandon looked caught. "Strange how?" "Secretive. Distracted. If something's wrong, I need you to tell me." Brandon's face softened. "Nothing's wrong. I promise. I've been planning something. But I can't tell you what yet." "Planning what?" "You'll see soon," he said, kissing her forehead. "Trust me. It's a good thing." Tanya tried to let it go, but the worry gnawed at her. Patricia noticed at Sunday dinner a week before Christmas. "What's bothering you, dear?" she asked, pulling Tanya aside while Brandon and Caleb were playing chess with Richard in the living room. "It's probably nothing," Tanya said. "Brandon's just been acting odd lately." "Secretive." Patricia smiled, a knowing look in her eyes. "I wouldn't worry about that." "You know something," Tanya accused gently. "I know my son," Patricia said. "And I know he loves you. Whatever he's planning, it's because he loves you. Trust that." The Saturday before Christmas, Brandon woke Tanya early. "Get up. Get dressed. We're going somewhere." "Where?" Tanya asked groggily. "It's a surprise. Wear something warm." An hour later, the three of them were in Brandon's car, driving to the park where they'd spent so many Saturdays together. It was cold, the ground covered in a light dusting of snow, but the sun was shining bright and clear. "Why are we at the park?" Caleb asked as they got out of the car. "Because this is our place," Brandon said. "This is where we became a family." He led them to their favorite spot, near the swings where Caleb had first called him Dad. Patricia and Richard were already there, along with Rachel and her husband, James and Carlos from the precinct, Diane from the hotel, and several other people who'd become important in their lives over the past year. "What's going on?" Tanya asked, her heart starting to race. Brandon took her hands, pulling her to face him. "Tanya Brooks, 1 year ago you saved my life. You stopped on a rainy street and helped a dying stranger. You could have walked away. You should have walked away. But you didn't. You stayed. You held my hand. You promised you wouldn't leave. And you kept that promise." Tanya's eyes filled with tears. "Brandon, that night changed everything for me," Brandon continued, his voice thick with emotion. "Not just because you saved my physical life, but because you showed me what real goodness looks like. What real love looks like. And then you let me into your life, into Caleb's life, and I got to see that goodness and love every single day." He dropped to one knee and Tanya's breath caught. Caleb moved to stand beside Brandon, both of them looking up at her with matching hopeful expressions. "We've been planning this together," Brandon said, glancing at Caleb, "because we're a team. And we want to make this official." Brandon pulled out a small velvet box and opened it, revealing a beautiful diamond ring that caught the sunlight and sparkled like ice. "Tanya, will you marry me? Will you let me be your husband and Caleb's father? Will you let me love you both for the rest of my life? And will you be my mom forever?" Caleb added, his voice high and excited. "Like officially?" Tanya sobbed, happiness flooding through her so intensely she could barely breathe. "Yes," she managed. "Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes." Brandon stood and slipped the ring onto her finger, then pulled her into his arms and kissed her while everyone cheered. Caleb wrapped his arms around both of them and they stood there, the three of them holding each other, crying and laughing and so full of joy it felt like they might burst. Patricia and Richard came forward, hugging them all, crying happy tears. "Welcome to the family officially," Patricia said, holding Tanya tight. "My daughter." The celebration continued in the park for another hour. People congratulated them, admired the ring, talked about wedding plans. But Tanya barely heard any of it. She kept looking at the ring on her finger, at Brandon's face, at Caleb's pure happiness, and thinking about how impossible this all seemed. A year ago, she'd been alone and struggling. Now she was engaged to a man she loved completely, with a son who was thriving, with a career she was proud of, with a family that had embraced her without reservation. It was everything she'd never dared to hope for. That evening, back at home after Caleb had finally gone to sleep too excited to stay awake any longer, Brandon and Tanya sat together on the couch, her hand in his, both of them staring at the ring. "When did you know?" Tanya asked. "When did you know you wanted to marry me?" Brandon thought about it. "Honestly? Probably that first night in the hospital when I woke up and saw you there. You didn't have to stay. You didn't even know me. But you were there anyway. That's when I knew you were special. Everything after that just confirmed it." "I was so scared," Tanya admitted. "Scared to love you, scared to believe this could be real, scared it would all fall apart." "Did you ever think it would lead here?" Brandon asked. "When you stopped that night?" "No," Tanya said honestly. "I just knew I couldn't leave you there to die. I couldn't walk away from someone who needed help. But I never imagined it would become this. That you would become my whole world." "You're my whole world too," Brandon said. "You and Caleb. You're everything that matters." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, just being together, processing the magnitude of the commitment they'd just made. Finally Tanya spoke again. "When do you want to get married?" "As soon as possible," Brandon said immediately. "I don't want to wait. I don't need a big fancy wedding or months of planning. I just want you to be my wife." "Spring?" Tanya suggested. "Maybe April? Give us time to plan something simple but nice." "April sounds perfect," Brandon agreed. "Just family and close friends. Nothing fancy. Just us, promising to love each other forever." "Forever?" Tanya repeated, testing the word. It didn't scare her anymore. Forever with Brandon felt like the safest, most certain thing in her life. "I have something else to tell you," Brandon said, suddenly looking nervous. "What?" "I've been talking to a lawyer. About adopting Caleb. Officially. Legally. Making him my son in every way. I wanted to ask you first if that's okay." Fresh tears spilled down Tanya's cheeks. "You want to adopt him?" "More than anything," Brandon said. "He's already my son in my heart. I want him to be my son on paper too. I want him to have my name. I want to be his father legally, not just in practice." "Yes," Tanya said, throwing her arms around his neck. "Yes, please. You would love that. He already thinks of you as his dad." "Then I'll start the paperwork this week," Brandon said. "By the time we get married, he'll officially be mine." That night, as Tanya lay in bed next to her fiancé, she thought about the journey that had brought them here. Every choice, every moment, every act of kindness that had led to this. She'd chosen to stop on a rainy sidewalk. Chosen to stay with a stranger. Chosen to accept help when it was offered. Chosen to open her heart to love even when it was scary. And every single one of those choices had led her here. To this ring on her finger. To this man beside her. To this life that felt like a fairy tale but was real, so beautifully real. She looked at the ring sparkling in the moonlight coming through the window and smiled. In 4 months she would be Tanya Mitchell. And Caleb would be Caleb Mitchell. They would be a real family, not just in their hearts but on paper, legally bound together by love and choice and the promise of forever. It was more than she'd ever dreamed of. More than she'd thought possible. But it was hers. All hers. Because kindness had led her here. Because love had found her. Because hope had been worth holding on to, even in the darkest times. And this was just the beginning. April arrived with warm sunshine and blooming flowers, and with it came wedding preparations. True to their word, Tanya and Brandon kept things simple. The ceremony would be at the park, their park, where Brandon had proposed. Just 50 guests, all people who truly mattered to them. Patricia helped with the planning, finding a caterer and a florist and a photographer, but everything was understated and elegant, focused on the love they were celebrating rather than impressing anyone. Tanya's wedding dress was simple too. A white A-line dress with lace sleeves that Patricia had helped her find. Not too expensive, not too fancy, just beautiful. Caleb would wear a small blue suit and walk her down the aisle, giving her away to Brandon. The thought of it made Tanya cry every time she imagined it. The adoption papers had come through in February. Caleb's last name was now Mitchell, and he'd been so proud when he got his new birth certificate and social security card with his new name on them. He'd shown everyone at school, bursting with joy at finally having a dad who wanted him, who chose him, who loved him. The Thursday before the wedding, Tanya took the day off work. She and Patricia went to lunch, just the two of them, at a quiet restaurant downtown. Over salads and iced tea, Patricia reached across the table and took Tanya's hand. "I want you to know something," Patricia said. "You're not just becoming my daughter-in-law on Saturday. You're already my daughter. You have been for months. And I'm so grateful for you. For what you did for Brandon, yes, but also for who you are. For the woman who raised that wonderful boy, who works so hard, who loves so completely. I'm proud to call you my daughter. Tanya cried, of course. You've been more of a mother to me than my own mom ever was. You and Richard both, you've given me the family I always wanted. And you've given us the daughter we always hoped for, Patricia said. And a grandson who lights up our lives. You complete our family, Tanya. On Friday evening, the night before the wedding, there was a small rehearsal dinner at Richard and Patricia's house. Everyone who would be in the wedding party was there. Rachel, who would be Tanya's maid of honor. James, who would be Brandon's best man. Caleb, who would walk Tanya down the aisle. Diane, who would do a reading during the ceremony. After dinner, while everyone else was mingling in the living room, Brandon pulled Tanya aside onto the back patio. Tomorrow, he said, his eyes bright with emotion. Tomorrow you become my wife. Tomorrow you become my husband, Tanya said, smiling through happy tears that seemed to be her constant state these days. I've been thinking about that night, Brandon said. The night you found me. Do you ever think about how easily it could have gone differently? How you could have walked past me? How I could have died there? Sometimes, Tanya admitted. It scares me when I think about it. I think about it too, Brandon said. And I'm so grateful you stopped. So grateful you were the kind of person who would stop. Because that choice brought me here. To you. To this life. To everything that matters. I'm grateful too, Tanya said softly. I didn't know it that night, but stopping to help you was the best decision I ever made. It brought me you. It brought me your family. It brought me this whole new life. Brandon cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs gently wiping away her tears. I promise you, Tanya Mitchell to be, I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret that decision. I'm going to love you and Caleb with everything I have. I'm going to be the husband you deserve, the father he deserves. I'm going to build a life with you that's so full of love and joy and hope that every day feels like a blessing. You already do that, Tanya whispered. You already are that person. They kissed, slow and sweet, full of the promise of forever. Tomorrow they would make it official. Tomorrow they would stand in front of everyone they loved and promise to choose each other every single day for the rest of their lives. And Tanya couldn't wait. Saturday morning dawned clear and beautiful, the kind of perfect spring day that felt like nature itself was celebrating. Tanya got ready at Patricia's house, surrounded by her soon-to-be mother-in-law Rachel and Diane. They helped her with her dress, her hair, her makeup, all while Caleb ran in and out of the room in his little suit, too excited to sit still. At 2 o'clock they arrived at the park. White chairs were set up in rows facing an arch covered in flowers. Music played softly. Guests were already seated, all of them smiling and happy. Brandon stood at the altar with James, looking devastatingly handsome in his dark gray suit, his eyes scanning the path for his first sight of his bride. Rachel walked down the aisle first. Then Diane. Then the music changed and everyone stood. Tanya took Caleb's hand and together they started down the aisle. Brandon's face when he saw her was everything. Pure love, pure joy, pure wonder. He wiped his eyes quickly, not even trying to hide his tears. Tanya was crying too, but she was also smiling, so happy she felt like she might float away. When they reached the altar, the officiant asked, "Who gives this woman to be married?" Caleb stood up straighter. "I do. I'm giving my mom to my dad so we can all be a family forever." There wasn't a dry eye in the crowd. Brandon reached down and hugged Caleb tightly before taking Tanya's hand. Caleb went to sit with Patricia and Richard in the front row, beaming with pride. The ceremony was simple and beautiful. They exchanged traditional vows, promising to love and honor and cherish each other in good times and bad, in sickness and health, for as long as they both lived. They exchanged rings. And then the officiant pronounced them husband and wife. "You may kiss your bride," he said, and Brandon didn't hesitate. He pulled Tanya close and kissed her deeply while everyone cheered. When they broke apart, he rested his forehead against hers. "Hello, Mrs. Mitchell," he whispered. "Hello, Mr. Mitchell," she whispered back. They walked back down the aisle hand in hand, Caleb running to join them, and the three of them walked together toward their future. Together. A family. Forever. The reception was held in a large tent nearby, with dinner and dancing and toasts. Richard gave a speech about how grateful he was that Tanya had saved his son, about how she'd brought so much love and light into their family. Patricia cried through her entire speech, talking about how happy she was to officially have a daughter. Rachel told funny stories about Tanya at work, and James told embarrassing stories about Brandon at the police station. But the best speech came from Caleb. Standing on a chair so everyone could see him, holding a microphone that was too big for his hands, he said simply, "I'm glad my mom stopped to help Brandon that night. Now I have a dad and my mom has a husband and we're all happy. And I think that's what happens when you're kind to people. Good things happen. So everyone should be kind." The guests erupted in applause and more than a few tears. Tanya pulled Caleb into her arms and held him tight, while Brandon wrapped his arms around both of them. "You're a smart kid," Brandon said, kissing the top of Caleb's head. "I know," Caleb said matter-of-factly, making everyone laugh. As the sun set and the lights in the tent came on, Tanya and Brandon had their first dance. They swayed together to a slow song, holding each other close, neither of them wanting to be anywhere else. "This is the happiest day of my life," Tanya said. "Mine too," Brandon agreed. "But you know what? I think tomorrow will be just as happy. And the day after that. And every day we have together. Because every day with you is the best day." "You're such a romantic," Tanya teased gently. "Only for you," Brandon said, spinning her around and making her laugh. Later, after all the guests had left and it was just the two of them, they stood in the park looking up at the stars. Their park. The place where everything had changed, where he'd proposed, where they'd gotten married. "Do you remember what you told me that night?" Brandon asked. "When you found me?" "I told you to hold on," Tanya said. "I told you about Caleb. I told you that you had people waiting for you. You told me to fight," Brandon said. "And I did. I fought because you were there. Because you cared. Because you gave me a reason to hold on." "I'm glad you fought," Tanya said, leaning into him. "I'm glad you held on. Because all of this, it's everything I never knew I needed." "Me too," Brandon said. "You saved my life that night, Tanya. But you did more than that. You gave me a life worth living. You gave me love and family and purpose. You gave me everything." They stood in comfortable silence, just being together, two people who'd found each other in the most unlikely way and built something beautiful from it. "Thank you," Brandon said finally. "For stopping that night. For staying. For choosing to help a stranger. Thank you for being you. Thank you for being worth saving," Tanya said, echoing the words she'd said to him so many months ago. "And for loving us the way you do." As they walked back to the car, hand in hand, husband and wife, Tanya looked back at the park one last time. This was where it all began. Where a choice to be kind, to help someone in need, had led to everything good in her life now. Her husband. Her son. Her family. Her future. She'd stopped on a rainy sidewalk a year ago and saved a dying man's life. But in doing so, she'd saved her own life too. She'd found love where she least expected it. She'd found family where there was none. She'd found hope when she'd almost stopped believing in it. And now, walking into forever with the man she loved and the son they both adored, she knew beyond any doubt that kindness always mattered. Love always won. Hope always led somewhere good. You just had to be brave enough to stop, to stay, to help, to open your heart to the possibility that maybe, just maybe, something beautiful was waiting on the other side of fear. And for Tanya Mitchell, née Brooks, something beautiful had been waiting. A whole lifetime of beautiful, in fact. And it was just beginning. The end. A year ago, Tanya Brooks was just trying to survive. Today, she's living proof that one moment of kindness can change everything. That stopping to help a stranger can lead to the love of a lifetime. That choosing hope and goodness, even when it's scary, always leads somewhere worth going. This is what happens when you lead with your heart. When you refuse to walk past someone in need. When you believe that every life matters, including your own. And sometimes, the life you save by being kind is your own.